Nice. Okay, so a couple of things before we get started. There's a lot of content in the slides, so I'll probably be talking a little fast, but feel free to ask questions in the chat, which I'm going to open now. And also
monitor.
Okay. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
And also I will probably, I'll pause kind of throughout. And lastly, we have probably like 15, 20 minutes at the end for the live workshop. And so people can kind of work through an actual like agent building and ask questions then as well. I think just, so I looked at the sign up and there's a lot of kind of a range of experiences of the people who sign up today. So so today's talk is mostly about how to build one agent really, really well. This isn't about like building, orchestrating a suite. This isn't about diving into like, particular platforms. What I'm going to talk about is platform agnostic. And also, this is kind of more for general purpose agents and not for coding agents. I know a couple of people use AI for like coding assistance. So that is a very, much better developed use case for agents. So that's not what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about kind of general purpose agents. I think that's it. Okay, so I will get started. Okay, so the goal today, so I mean, I think most of you have experience, building with AI, building with agents of some sort. But I thought this graph was really appropriate because it also took me a while to kind of go through this trough of disillusionment to actually getting things to work really well. So the goal of today is to get you to, kind of learn from me and skip over this trough and just go directly to, okay, I know how to build something that works really well. Great. Okay, so there's 4 sections. I'm going to quickly go over what is an agent. That one is pretty straightforward, but there's some things that are confusing. We're going to talk about a couple of principles and just go really deep into those principles. We'll go through an example of something I built for answer engine optimization. So it's really helped me kind of create content for the site that I'm working on that goes viral pretty consistently. And then lastly, we'll have maybe like 20 to 25 minutes at the end for you to build your own agents. And we can do it live and help each other and ask questions. Okay, so what is an agent? So I think just because of marketing, there is a lot of things that are kind of, there's a lot of confusing messaging about what is actually an agent. So let's talk about what they are not. So first, there's like, you've seen, you all know like Zapier and the kind of frameworks that are kind of pure automation and kind of purely script-based. So, those are definitely not agents. There is a subclass that's like kind of similar, like if you build a custom GPT or a custom gem on Gemini, these are things that are kind of agent light. So they can answer questions, they can use simple tools. So they're like that baby step of being an agent, of, kind of taking action for you. But what we're going to talk about really today is processes that can reason, then act for you, and then also loop in an automated way and learn. So we're going to talk about just a single agent. So what differentiates a single agent in terms of capability is that it has access to like a whole suite of tools. So tool use is going to be super, super important to make sure it works well. You can give it a goal. You don't have to give it very strict instructions. You can give it a goal and then it can autonomously act on the goal. And then there is kind of this looping mechanism where it learns. So it plans, it kind of runs, it loops, it adapts based on what happens. And then it kind of, improves and learns, and then it keeps getting better. So that's kind of the single agent that we're going to dive into. And then also kind of a teaser for, I'll probably do like an agent 201 at some point, orchestration across multiple agents. So let's say you have one that works really well, an AEO, answer engine optimization agent that works really well, and you want to now create a growth team. So an agent that does SEO, one that does AEO, one that does social. That's more of like that multi-agent kind of a orchestrating of a team of agents. So that's going to be a future course. So today we're going to talk about this. Cool. Oh yeah. I'll probably skip over this part. So this is just, so when I first started, I was a little confused about what was the difference between a custom GPT and an agent, because it also kind of, when I wanted to run, audit my website, it also told me, hey, I audited your website, here's my recommendations, but it actually was kind of failing in the background. And not giving me like correct answers because it couldn't actually use the tools it needed to. So this is just an example. I guess I'll go over quickly. So let's say you wanted to, find influence. So let's say you're, promoting, you build a new product, you wanted to find influencers to promote your product. A custom GPT will do a very simple one-off, like one question and answer, loop. So it will search Google or TikTok. It will return, like mega influencers that seem to fit what you're building. But if you have a more autonomous agent, which is kind of this middle rectangle, it can be more sophisticated and looking for what that type of influencer that will fit, like that could really market your product. So it could, connect to a database or a specialized API. It could filter based on some criteria. It could then do several more passes at verifying if they have like really high quality engagement, etc. So it could return a much more nuanced and a list that's a much better fit for you than just like a one pass. But once you start building agents, you'll really like figure out what it does well and what it doesn't well. So they have a single agent has limitations. So maybe if found really like high fit influencers for you, but then it's like context window is full. So then it's writing it when you asked it to write outreach emails, it wrote something really generic. So when you start seeing one single agent hitting its limits, that's when you start thinking about, well, how do I now break it up into kind of specialized sub-agents and orchestrate them to work together? But that's going to be for a future presentation. Okay, so I really like this quote, this principle of studying the whole to understand the peg. So I found this from kind of construction engineering and construction design, like building design, because to build an agent really, really well, you have to know how it fails. So that's kind of what the whole is. You have to like kind of understand how it fails to know how to make it succeed. So I think probably a lot of you have heard of like jagged intelligence. So that means LLMs are like amazing at certain things, but are terrible at other things. So that's where the jagged part comes in. I like to think of LLMs as big brain babies. So they're like Stewie from Family Guy, like so smart, but so like no common sense, like, so let's kind of talk about what the jaggedness is, right? So what are LLMs good at? Like it knows almost the entirety of like human information, human history. Yeah. Except up until the last like 3 months. Like it knows everything except for the last 3 months. It can pattern match really, really quickly. And that's kind of, it's the core of why it's so good. It pattern matches across like the entirety of humanity. It's infinitely creative, which means, it's a language model. So if you wanted to generate new ideas, it will just give you like new content, like based on the language that it was trained on. So infinitely creative. And we have trained it in coding so well that it can now do like, it has probably now like the ability to code like a junior engineer. So it is so good at all these things, which means that this is why like building an agent based on an LLM, it's like so powerful nowadays. But where is the hole? What is it bad at? So I really love this first quote. Someone said LLMs are basically the average of averages. This is what AI slop is. Like if you don't trying to massage out exactly what you want, the output is just going to be very generic, very average. It's good, but it's not great. It doesn't know logic. It does not have common sense. So don't trust it with anything that's like logic based. It just hallucinates confidently. So you really have to know, is this a situation where it might be hallucinating, and try to kind of mitigate that instead of just assuming that it actually, when it's confident, it actually knows what it's talking about. It doesn't actually know facts. So, and this is something that I actually, for some of my work, I spend a lot of time building tools to like check facts, because something that seems really simple, you actually have to like go out and do web search, and there's like kind of multi-layered verification of facts. We know that it kind of has bad memory, so the context window, so you have to manage its memory usage. And also this last one, which I find extremely frustrating, is that it's non-deterministic. So if you have an agent and you ask it the same thing 10 times, it will give you 10 different answers. So that means you have to be really careful about what you're using the LLM part for versus like tools and other parts for. So okay, so this is kind of the pros and cons, the big brain baby. Okay, so that's kind of the base, the background, a kind of high level overview of what we're working with. Let's talk about the principles of how to kind of massage an LLM into kind of a high performant agent. Okay, so there's 4 patterns, and planning, tool use, evaluation, and kind of optimization. That's what multi-agent really is. So we'll start with planning. Okay. Let's see. Yes. Okay. So why plan? Like, why don't you just like kind of YOLO one prompt and create an agent? Well, I think if you do that, it kind of looks like the Roadrunner or the Coyote, and it's harebrained ideas. It creates all these machinery and it looks really impressive, but when you actually try to use it, it fails in like all these different ways. So if you don't really plan out what you're building, then what you're going to see when you actually run this agent in production is that it might just fail silently, and it's not going to tell you. It's going to kind of do something for a long time and just going to eat up all your credits. It's going to, kind of hallucinate, and you might be trusting something that's fake. And it's really hard to debug later if it's kind of, you're not building this in a systematic way. So if the agent isn't like structured in a way that is kind of easy to kind of figure out where it's going wrong. Okay, so the first principle is planning. And actually a lot goes into planning, and each of these aspects has a clear goal. So first you need to tell the agent very clearly what the goal is and what the success criteria looks like. Then second, persona is, so everyone kind of has a different context. Maybe you're like a startup marketer. Maybe you're a marketer in a certain like domain. So you want to kind of tell it background so that it can kind of customize and not be the average of averages. Examples are really helpful. If you're doing anything that's more like text language, in kind of this language area, it's hard to describe what you want sometimes. It's easier to give it several examples and kind of have the agent, the LLM, infer the instruction from examples, bootstraps the instruction. Steps. So you want to, whatever you're building, you want to break it down into really concrete, manageable, small steps. You don't want this big, like, massive, hairy piece of code. You want a lot of little steps that you can step through and then kind of, understand what's happening and debug later. And when it's many small steps, it's also easier for the LLM to kind of figure out what's happening versus it sometimes assumes and does different things in different scenarios. Tools is going to be a part that we, tools will be one of the sections later, but tools are super important. As much as you can, use tools, don't use the LLM. And also, so then verify, you want to, have a process for kind of checking and catching failures. And then lastly, document. So a lot of this is actually like good software development principles. If you're going to use this more than once, you should document it so you can maintain it. You're going to have lots of ideas if it works well to kind of update it, make it better. So you don't want it to just be like unmanageable. You want to kind of help make it maintainable. Why do we need to provide the steps? Aren't examples? Okay, and we can talk about this later. So if it's something very simple, maybe the agent, it's like a one-step agent. But if it's something a little complex, like the example I'm going to go through, it's much easier to break it down into steps. So it kind of depends on what you're doing. Okay, tools. Okay, so why do we use tools? So there's going to be a lot of cartoon analogies today. So if you've watched Inside Out, if an LLM doesn't have tools, it's kind of like the emotions in your head. It's like it just thinks up things, but it can't really take action, right? So obviously, if it doesn't have tools to check facts, then it hallucinates, or it generates outdated information. The number of times LLMs confidently gave me outdated information. It can't take impact on the real world. It can't affect the real world without tool, and it can't learn, and it can't ground itself in real data. So those are some of the examples. And I mean, I think the most important takeaway here is that anytime you can use a tool, use a tool. Like, don't use the LLM. So if you can code. It's cheaper, it's faster, it's more repeatable. LLMs could be the orchestrator, but I mean, and I'll go into that a little more. So generally, there's 3 buckets of tools. There's tools for retrieving data from the real world, so web search, APIs, files. Tools to process, and most of this is like coding, Python scripts, other types of like coding platforms. This is really important because the answers, the output you generate is actually correct and repeatable. Like, repeatable is very important. And then lastly, there's kind of tools that take action. So, if you're trying to, a lot of people who sign up for this wanted to kind of make like a chief of staff agent. So it's got to take in a lot of your information and then kind of connect to your tools, your email, your Notion, whatever it is, to kind of take action and organize your workflow. So this is so these are the type of tools. Okay. So the third part is about checking, testing, and evaluating. And then something works, you evaluate, you iterate, you improve. So there's the development process takes a lot of iteration to kind of build something good. So and why evaluate? Well, you wouldn't send out an email without proofreading, right? So you also want to kind of check that your agent's output is correct before you really run it on something important. So that's kind of, high level. So there are kind of 3 general buckets of ways you evaluate. And you can kind of do it during development and also in production. You want to kind of constantly check that it's correct. So and so the 3 buckets are kind of dependent on the use case. You have different strategies. So you can use like the easiest thing to start with is just to use the agent to evaluate itself. And the LLM, you can use, so if you use an LLM to kind of check yourself, the most, this is kind of for, content, tone, quality, kind of completeness, maybe, of whatever content you're generating, the structure, So all of these things that are kind of content and, kind of based on like text meaning, LLMs are good for kind of reflecting on its own output. And it's kind of funny because sometimes if you tell it to do something, to generate something, it's so hard for an LLM to generate something like no M dashes on the first pass. But if you then get another LLM or another agent or another whatever to check the first one's output, then it finds the errors. So you can either use the same agent or use like a specialized agent to kind of validate the output for all these attributes. And the important thing to the important lesson here is always use very clear rubrics. I mean, as much as you can just create a set of yes and no, a checklist of yes and no questions, like that's the easiest way to kind of do it, to evaluate and also ensure that it's it's clear as kind of a rubric to evaluate the output. Okay, so that's one. Okay, two, I mean, even better if you can verify the output in code, do that in code. So, so for example, let's say you're generating content and you want to make sure the citations, the pages that it's citing is correct. I actually have a pretty somewhat complex way of verifying citations are correct, because LLM they hallucinate citations all the time. So that's one big example of what you want to check in code versus another LLM. So these are things that are pretty deterministic. So like formatting, schema, maybe you can check the data integrity if you're doing some analysis. If you can check it in code, definitely do that. And bonus is very easy and fast to run. And the goal of this is to kind of fix at the root. So so a lot of times you're going to be building, and then it's really easy to kind of just patch the result, fix the result, but you want to fix it at the root. So general best practice. And then so there's also kind of a hybrid evaluation methodology, and this is for a couple of things that it's kind of harder to do by using one or the other LLM or code. So first is, I think anyone who does use AI agents to code, that like an LLM might be good at checking for your like your style guide, your like coding style guide. Maybe like it generates edge cases or generates test cases for you to then like run your code on, to test your code against. But then to actually like check for errors, you want to actually run the code. So fact checks is another thing that probably will need to be hybrid for a while. Code curling, web search can kind of verify the existence of certain citations, and maybe, but at the end, you still want a human in the loop probably to kind of verify, facts and certain types of other like high importance outputs. Yes. Okay. And then so this is the last principle. So teams, multi-agent teams. So if you have the resources to hire someone, hire people on your team, you wouldn't hire generalists, right? You would hire specialists. So as your agent capability grows, you start thinking about breaking it out into like a multi-agent team as well. And there's multiple reasons to do this. So for example, maybe you have one orchestrator, and then you have certain sub-agents that specialize in doing certain things. Maybe for certain things, you don't need like Opus or Sonnet. You can use Haiku, something like cheaper and faster. So for certain tasks, you break it out into agents that are cheaper and faster. Maybe for security and privacy reasons, you want to limit tool access or like access to sensitive information. So you have that be a sub-agent. And then maybe you have another agent to verify, like I said earlier. So as your need grows, think about how to kind of break it up. grow into specialized agents and coordinate them. So this is a little harder, but there's kind of a range. There's like easier ways to do this and harder ways to do this. So on the example I'll talk about later, I used kind of an easy way to kind of build a multi-agent team, even though it's one agent. Okay. And then just quickly, if you think about if now you have a team of agents, how am I going to get them to work together? So the easy way is to kind of think of it as an assembly line and have one A hand out the output to B, then generates something, hands the output to C to do something. And there, for certain kind of like contexts, this is like perfect. So let's say you're doing like lead enrichment, you're generating kind of blog posts in your voice. So those are very clearly kind of linear sequences. So that's kind of simpler to bring up in the beginning. There's also kind of a more hierarchical org. So it's kind of similar to kind of our companies. Your multi-agent team can have kind of an org hierarchy. So this is a little harder to orchestrate. But so that, for example, this is something that I'm working on right now. So I'm building a growth team for the product that I'm building. So there is an orchestrator, which is a growth PM, kind of a manager. And then there's a lot of sub-agents. Some do audits, some build like AEO, SEO strategy, some generates posts to social media. And so it's harder to generate, harder to manage, but more powerful. And if we do the Agent 201, we'll talk about this kind of configuration. But today, I think if we can start and build one single agent that works really, really well, then we can start building out the team. And I think a lot of what I see on the web, on social media, is people overbuild. They start with a team and then it doesn't really work well, and then it's hard to manage. So I'm kind of promoting starting with one thing, doing it really well, and then growing the team. Yeah. You have a question, Teresa?
I do. Thank you so much for your presentation. This is really phenomenal. In the chat, Oliver said something about scraping LinkedIn, and that was exactly the same question that I had, because I tried scraping LinkedIn, but with their proprietary guardrails, it's very difficult. Yeah. So I'm kind of wondering what you would recommend to scrape an unscrapable website.
So I guess scrape is the wrong word. I think if you for LinkedIn specifically, I think if you have, maybe it's like API access. I know there are platforms that can ingest your LinkedIn, but it's some kind of other access. It's not scraping, but I'm not sure.
They do have an API, but it also doesn't quite let you scrape. So they really have blocked that. So there are a lot of people who've been trying to figure out how to do this. Mm-hmm. And at least everyone I've talked to has been like, yeah, no dice. All the different ways like that you think you might be able to do it don't actually give you that.
Yeah.
Some people, you can download your
Sorry?
Oh no, some people are saying in the chat, like you can download your contacts and re-upload them or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's, it kind of depends on how much you want to scrape or how much information you want to extract from LinkedIn. So yeah, contacts. Yeah. Okay. Well, good suggestions in here. I think Steph will be sharing. Okay, let's see. Okay, so we're at 35. So I will try to hurry through this next part. So kind of this workshop all started because, as part of the kind of fractional CTO work we've been doing with startups, some of the startups we work with are super lean and they're launching products for the first time. And everyone knows that like now AI, coding makes coding and building really easy, but like selling and kind of getting your product like marketing is much harder. So but also, startups and small teams are really bootstrapped. So how do you do market and sell in a very lean way? So I started experimenting with kind of building agents to do that. And one of them kind of worked really well. So for this specific example, we're going to talk about an answer engine optimization strategy agent. So the problem is, like I said, there is so much noise out there now because everyone is building something on their on the weekend, and everyone is like using kind of AI to generate their LinkedIn posts, and it's just really hard to kind of cut through the noise. So that's one. Two, the tools that are out there right now, they're not great for startups, for early stage kind of small teams. So they're either still kind of manual and really like tedious to use, or if you go to an agency, this AEO space, it's kind of like enterprise pricing and it's really expensive. And, it's just, there's not a lot of transparency before you kind of buy. So it's really hard to figure out like what is really valuable to help you kind of promote your product. At the beginning, at the early stages. Okay, so the idea I had for building this agent was instead of all these options, can I just build an agent that I give you a simple set of inputs? What am I building? Maybe my competitors, that's optional. Like what is kind of my ICP? What is this market I'm trying to kind of break through the noise in? And then the agent kind of runs and does his thing. And then it outputs like a list of steps, prioritized steps that'll kind of help me rank, help me get the news out. So, one step, input runs for 20 minutes, gives me this output, and then I can take action on the output. So I've created a bunch of kind of posts and content based on the recommendations of this agent, and they've done pretty well on social media. So far so good. Okay, so let's look at what this agent actually looks like. So this is one. So when I say agent, I mean a skill file. So this is one skill file, but an agent, it can spin out kind of sub agents. So this isn't a multi-agent, even though it looks like a multi-agent. So this is one agent that spins out sub tasks. Okay, so it's like a combination of that linear A to B to C flow I talked about with a little bit of a hierarchy. Okay, so what's happening here? One, it starts off with a coordinator. So it gathers input, audits your site, kind of audits your ICP, your market. And then two, it goes and it either uses a tool like Ahref, or it just searches on Google. It tries to understand for the 4 answer engines, Google, Perplexity, Claude, ChatGPT, what are people asking in this area? What are the answers? And like how good are the answers? So then it runs these subtasks. It returns all these answers, and then it comes back to the coordinator, which then kind of synthesizes across these 4 answer engines, like what are people asking and what are the answers, and then it finds competitors, like who's ranking and who's you're probably not ranking, so who's ranking, and then it then goes back again, and then it searches one, it looks at your competitors, like what is this content that's ranking, what are they doing well, learning from them, and then it also goes to Reddit, and then it's really important for answer engine to know what people are asking in like specific words, like what is your customer vocabulary, what's your user vocabulary, because now they're prioritizing like actual answers. They're not just having information is not good enough. You need to structure informations to directly answer questions. So what are people asking and how are they asking it? What is the language they're using to ask it? And then we come back again, and now we're on step 6. Synthesize all of that. Now you kind of know what are people asking, what are getting served back, are they actually good? And then deciding like, oh, maybe this high intent cluster is easier to rank for because the results are not great, whereas these other clusters, they're kind of highly like answered, so don't try to compete for those. And then synthesizes everything together, and now we're at 8, and it kind of prioritizes it into a list, so that it's just like one thing for me to act on. So So yeah, so this is one agent, but it does spin out a lot of sub processes. And a couple of things to call out here is like, if I did everything in Sonnet or Opus, it would be super slow and super expensive. That's why for like very clear, like simple tasks, I use Haiku as like the sub agent. And then the synthesis is through Sonnet or Opus. Okay, so then this is just an example of what that output looks like. So it gives you kind of an executive summary. Yeah, yeah, that's a good question. It kind of ranks, it prioritizes the opportunities, gives it kind of a score. It estimates the demand for those question clusters. Let's see. Oh yeah, here it kind of gives a breakdown of the clusters and who's kind of being cited for those questions. And then it also recommends the type of content. Like, is it a guide? Is it a listicle? Is it a blog post? Like, what is, being placed? So what is that type of content you should try to create to serve that question? Okay, yeah. How do you determine if the task is simple? That's a good question. Kind of philosophical. Yes, go ahead.
You know what I would do is I would say, break this down to a piece that's small enough for Haiku to execute as part of my planning phase.
Yes. Okay, and then so kind of the process, I would say, so this is why planning is so important. I probably spend like a week to 2 weeks to just really research what is AEO, because there's not a lot of great like authoritative guides on it. And then once I had a good idea of what I wanted to build, then I built it. And that part is super easy. And then kind of like iterating on it, figuring out what breaks, hallucinating, like, the evaluation, like all of the other stuff probably took a long time. Like that took the longest by far. But if I hadn't planned, I mean, yeah, I don't know, this whole pie chart would be broken. Oh yeah, and then kind of so because that worked really well, the AEO topic research agent, now I'm starting to kind of build out this other stack, which takes a lot longer. So I feel like it's not there yet. So I don't want to like present it yet. But so the full stack will have a whole section for kind of research, and then another section for content generation and distribution. And then like that coordinator, the orchestrator kind of, balances and prioritizes. So that's kind of the future. That's going to be the next session. Okay, great. All right, so we have 15 minutes left. Okay, I do see a question. I just want to quickly say, I want to leave this 15 minutes for people to start building their own agents. I think most people who signed up had some idea of what they wanted to build. So here is a suggestion for how to get started, like as a structure of a prompt that starts the planning process. So you start planning, and then let's use the 15 minutes to also ask questions, or either ask questions you already have, or as you're kind of building and something kind of doesn't make sense and you have questions as you're building, then ask as well. Yeah, I didn't want, so this is kind of a free form, you build what you want kind of section. I didn't want to kind of force everyone to build the same thing. So this is more of a template. Enter. So like, for example, I know Claude has a skill builder skill. So it's kind of like meta. It will build the skill for you. So let's say I want to create a skill that, I don't know, audits websites and gives me audits CPG product websites and gives me the top selling the best promotion. That's okay. What does the Nabisco website actually look at? Nabisco.
Maybe they would not have business.
Oh, mine episode? Weird. Ooh, best seasonal promotion. That's going on right now. And then I'm a CPG startup interested founder, interested in, so I'm filling in the brackets, interested in health conscious products. I want the brief to be visual and product images and succinct facts, not editorials. I don't know. Facts, not marketing speak. Okay, now let's. What did my prompt say? Oh yeah. Ask me, verify. Ask me any questions you have, and let's create a plan. So like, for this agent, okay, and then yeah, and then just kind of go through the process. It's gonna, yeah. And then when you're ready to kind of consolidate this as a skill, you can just tell it to save it as a skill, and then you can, download it and save it into a project. So then maybe I'll create a project for market research, CPG market research. What CPG size do we want to audit? Any URL I paste. What should the output focus? Limited edition, seasonal SKU. How do you want to consume the brief? Ooh, side-by-side table. Yeah. Cool. Oh, so we're at 1. I guess if anyone else, does anyone else have any quick questions? Great.
I helped answer a question for Sarah in the chat, but like based on what you said earlier, but I think like it might be nice. What I'll do after this class is I'll do an email group for people who want to join. You can opt into it, and basically let's help each other learn, maybe, right? And you can, as you're going, you can drop in your link to the thing that you tried to do using use prompt. Truly, it's as easy as she showed you, like copying and pasting it into the chat box, taking out the brackets, filling in your own content, right? And see what you get. And like just a reminder that like vibe coding and building these things are like an iterative process. You're almost never going to get exactly what you need in the first pass. So you're going to have to keep talking to it to refine it and get it to work the way you want it to. So I'll give people the option to join this optional group where we can just continue discussing. But I'll send out all the video and stuff. So if you want to watch it back on your own time, you can do that as well. Thank you so much. You are a brilliant leader. And, just to give a shameless plug for her and Charmaine, like if you guys need help with this stuff, they run a product and technology consultancy called Potluck Tech. They're really phenomenal. They also do engineering and technical team coaching. Maybe they've expanded since our last chat too, but they're really wonderful humans, great teachers, and I can't endorse them more highly. Like they're just really wonderful Xooglers. And they do stuff like this all the time, helping to educate their clients and also build things for them. So I'll send out that information over the email too, but thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. This is fun. Good seeing everyone.